All right, we're back here again, Santrice. We had the funeral today for your cousin, Tamir, and a very emotional day, right?
Right.
And just, I don't know, what's your feelings on today?
Today has been a long, trying process for all of the family, especially his mother and his siblings. But we're just trying to make it through this and trying to get our message across to
And
everybody.
okay, and what's that message?
Our message is we have two things to say with the family. We want to say, first, the police shouldn't use such deadly force on anything that they do because you're killing our kids, our loved ones, our family members, whoever it is. It doesn't just have to be our family. But the second thing is, this was a kid. And if the message would have went across from the 911 dispatchers to the policemen, maybe it would have been different. But it was a lot of balls that was dropped in our situation. So whether it was the 911 operator or the police taking in what they heard, something had been dropped. And you didn't understand that this was a kid out here doing whatever kids do. And that's what he was doing, what kids do.
Right. Do you see this as a mistake on the part of the police, or do you see this as them being incompetent?
I see it as both. I see it as the 911 operator didn't relay the message had it should been, relayed to her or to them, and the policeman should have sat back give it a couple seconds to sit back and see what the situation is before you react. I see it as both.
All
The
right.
policeman should have sat back and seen what it was. You could have sat back and seen from, I didn't see the video, but everybody is saying that this was a kid doing kid things with this BB gun. And had they sat back and looked at that, they would have seen that this was a 12-year-old kid playing with a BB gun.
Right. And and so it's pretty much clear what happened here. Is that correct? I
Yes.
mean, there was a video camera. I went out there to the scene after the funeral today, and I kind of poked around a little bit just to kind of get a feel for the situation. It's right in the park.
Right.
There's kids playground there. It was daylight hours. About what time was
Right.
this?
This was approximately 3 p.m.
3 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw, obviously you haven't seen the video. It's
No, I haven't seen it, but
right.
I know it was 3 p.m. And from what I've heard, he was playing in the park by himself as well as with other kids, but they done cut everything else, but they taped him by himself playing with this gun or playing with this BB gun with snow and tossing rocks, doing things that normal kids would have did. If they would have sat back, they would have known this was a kid playing with a toy, not a kid being aggressive or a kid having vengeance and doing whatever he should do. This was a kid playing with a gun.
Right. Now, today, on the same day of your cousin's funeral, some new news came out today.
Right.
And I don't know, why don't you tell us what you heard?
Well, from what I've heard and I've read, is that the city of Independence, Ohio, uh, wouldn't let the same policeman be on a police force because he wasn't able to cope with policeman duties, which means like they gave him certain tests that he had to go through and follow, and he wasn't capable of following them tests, so they let him go. And so he was released in, I think it was 2011 or 12. He was released of policeman duties because they said he wasn't capable of being a policeman. So at some point, he left Independence and went to Cleveland Police Department. And I guess maybe Cleveland didn't give him the same test. because he was able to go through Cleveland test and be approved toward.
All right, and so it's pretty clear from what you're saying and from what the news is relating that this officer had some sort of emotional issues. They described that he had problems with the handling of his weapon. I guess he also had a
They said,
meltdown or something.
right, they said he had an emotional breakdown when he came down to the policeman's reacting on a scene with a weapon, and he wasn't capable of doing that. So Independence, Ohio was not willing to accept him. I don't know what happened between Independence, Ohio, and Cleveland, Ohio, that Cleveland accepted him, but Independence had denied him from coming to their police department.
Right. And how do you how do you take this? I mean, your family has been demonized pretty much by
Right.
the whole community, this area. People, I mean, instead of treating you guys like victims, they've portrayed you guys as a bunch of thugs and criminals, and I mean, just not taking into account the actual incident that this little boy who was separate from the whole thing. I mean, how do you feel about that?
My whole thinking is, if ever somebody is to be a policeman, they need to go extensive background checks on what they did at any aspects. And if he wasn't approved for the Independence case, why was he approved for a Cleveland police officer? Did y'all not look into that, or did y'all dismiss that? Because if Independence said he wasn't mentally capable of being a police officer, why was he capable of being a Cleveland police officer without it being extensive checks? If Cleveland knew that he wasn't do well at, if he wasn't doing well as being under fire, why did you even allow him to be a police officer here?
Right.
Independence is a small community. If Independence didn't accept him, why would Cleveland accept him as being a police officer?
Right, right. That definitely does seem strange, but it's really not strange because it's actually fairly common for police officers who, for whatever reason, aren't able to fit in into a certain department for them to lateral over and to go over to another department. And there's numerous officers that go from department to department to department, and so that's not just a problem here in Ohio, but it's a problem that's pretty much going on all over the nation.
My thinking is, as a police officer, everybody should have to be investigated. We need to know what your background is, what you're capable of handling, what you're not capable of handling. If this is your job as a police officer, if you weren't capable of handling it with one department, with one city, you're not capable of doing it with another city. If he couldn't do it when it came to Independence, he couldn't do it when it came to Cleveland. His job qualifications wasn't going to change. He had the same training from Independence to Cleveland. If he wasn't doing it in Independence, he's not going to do it in Cleveland. So why was he allowed to be in Cleveland and being on the police force and handling our kids or our loved ones or our freedom? Not just our kids, but it should have been some kind of guidelines of what he could do and what he couldn't do, what he could handle and what he couldn't handle. He couldn't handle people being out here and him coming to our defense. If he couldn't do it for one city, he can't do it for another. So why did they just let him go from Independence applying for the police department to Cleveland applying for the police department? Independence told him no, and then he went right to Cleveland, and Cleveland let him in.
Right, and there's quite a big contrast with Independence, that area, which is mainly an upper economic
Right,
location, versus Cleveland,
right.
working the gritty streets of Cleveland, where you're going to be dealing with high crime areas and things like that. And so, yeah, definitely that should have been a red flag. How does this make you feel in light of the fact that this area here, we'll just say the state of Ohio, all right? Everyone knows what happened by now, and there's just been a lot of negative things being said. I mean, how do you feel about that now versus what has come out regarding this officer?
If he didn't pass the qualifications for one city guidelines, he shouldn't have passed the other.
What I'm trying to say here is they demonized you, Santrice. They demonized the mom. They, I guess, even the child. They tried to say that he had a fetish for weapons and things like that. Was any of that true?
No.
All
No.
right.
Here's the thing. His mother didn't do with him playing with guns. His father didn't do with him playing with guns. He got that gun from a kid that was at the recreation center with him. This was not nothing that went on at the households. That same day that this whole gross act happened, he got that gun from the same place that he got killed. So he got that
From
gun
another child.
from another kid. He got
Has
this
that
gun.
child been determined who that child is?
Yeah, we know who that child is.
Okay.
We all know it's the family. We know who that child is. And the child has admitted to us that he traded, the gun was a trade-off. He traded that gun for a cell phone. The cell phone, the guy, the little boy that he wanted to play with that gun, the little boy wanted to play with his cell phone. So he gave the little boy his cell phone to play with while he played with the BB gun. He's not the only kid to play with that BB gun. That's my thing. He's not the only kid to play with that BB gun. A bunch of other kids played with it. Maybe 10, 12 kids played with that BB gun. He wasn't the only kid. Only when the police came and got to that point, Tamir was the one that had the gun at that point. All the kids had played with that BB gun. They had traded it off. They had played with it. And they had played with the phone. They have, traded it back and forth. Tamir wasn't the only kid to play with that gun. And that gun didn't come from his mom's household. We don't play BB guns in this family. We don't play any kind of guns in this family. He traded that BB gun off for a cell phone. And he traded that BB gun off for a cell phone. And they played with it. They tossed it back and forth. When the police came, Tamir had the BB gun.
Okay. All right. That's good that you explained that for how it is. And I mean, how does this make you guys feel? All these lies that are going on. I mean, it just seems like, Cleveland seems to be a little bit more different than other parts of the country where there's a lot of outrage, for example, with the case today, the Eric Garner. I mean, today was the day that they decided that they weren't going to indict this guy who choked to death.
Right.
A man.
It's not any different for anything. It's not any different. Like, we still feel the same way the Eric Garner's family feel. He was unjustly choked out. Like, the police is using deadly force to get these kids and people to do whatever they want them to do. It's a shame in this nation and in this world that I have to tell my kids to do whatever the police tell you to do because I don't know what they're going to do to you if you don't. So I'm telling my kids, no matter what the police tell you to do it, and maybe you'll come back home and you could tell me about it later. Eric Gardner shouldn't have had to be choked out and being dead about anything that he did with some little cigarettes because he didn't even have no cigarettes at the end of this day. Tamir should have came home at the end of the day because that was a BB gun that he was playing with. Any other kid, like Mike Brown, everybody should have to go home to their family at the end of the day. No person, no family should have to bury their loved ones on something that wasn't crucial, nothing that wasn't necessary. We shouldn't have to bury our people because the police is using legal force. Here's what I'm going to tell you. If the police is supposed to have cameras on their body, if the police is supposed to have taser guns, the police is supposed to have all these extra things that they could do so that they don't have to kill anybody, why are we still allowing them to kill anybody? At the end of the day, they could have camered everything they done. Can you camera everything you done did with the Mike Garner situation? Can you camera everything you done did with the Mike Brown situation? Eric Garner, nobody should have to bury their loved ones. This is terrible. We burying our loved ones where we should all have to just fight for their justice and not fight for their death. We should not have to fight for their death. This is something that we should just be entitled to. Let us fight for our people's rights. Let us say Mike Garner shouldn't have been arrested Eric Garner shouldn't have been arrested or Mike Brown shouldn't have been arrested. But we not fighting for that. We fighting because these people have been killed. This is terrible. Nobody should not go home at the end of the day because the police takes on lethal lethal force to do anything they have to do. Take on what you have to do. Taser these people. If that's what you're saying they need to do, taser these people. Talk to these people. Lecture these people. Try these people. Take them to court and have a court case. But every case that I'm talking about, these people are dead, and we shouldn't have to do with that.
Right.
They shouldn't have to be dead.
Right. Now, playing a little bit the devil's advocate,
Mm-hmm.
looking at it from the police officer's standpoint
Mm-hmm.
of them, a lot of the times, saying that they're in fear for their lives and that they might not go home at the end of the night to their families. What do you think about that, or what do you have to say about that?
Here's my thinking. Either of these cases that I done mentioned were they in jeopardy and not going home to their family. But if they felt like that, police are supposed to be trained to look at things.
Okay.
So be trained to look for the gun coming at you. If you felt like Tamir was reaching for a gun, sit back and look at it for a second. If you hadn't pulled on him so close, you could have seen that he was trying to show you this is a fake gun. That baby was putting his hands up to show you this is a fake gun. It's not a real gun. The issue with Mike didn't have no gun on him. He wasn't shooting at police officers. So what could deadly force do to him compared to what he could do physically? Here's what I'm saying. Why was it such lethal force used? The same thing with the man that they strangled. What did he have? Nothing. He was laying on the ground and he had told them, I can't breathe. And he tossed his hands up. What lethal force can they use against you? You didn't feel like your life was in danger. None of these policemen felt like their life was in danger. None of them. It's not any sense for anybody not going home at the end of the night. I feel like that. When I go out at the end of the night, if I want to go out, I feel like everybody should make it home. Because we're not doing anything to make everybody else think like they're not going to go home. Everybody should make it home at the end of the night. That's my whole thinking on life. Tamir went to the recreation center.
The one place he should have been safe at.
Right. As a policeman, they should have sat back. Give him 2 or 3 seconds. Sit back and look at what the kids is doing around here. You knew that as you looked at that as a person, you knew that was a kid. The same thing with Mike Brown. Mike Brown didn't have a weapon in his hand, so if he went at you, you didn't have to use lethal force. My whole thing is, why use lethal force to get these people down? Why use lethal force to take these people out? Because that's what y'all doing. Y'all taking them out. Y'all ain't getting them down. Y'all taking them out. Where do it come a point that you saying, let's sit back and look at what they doing before